Hey, good morning everyone, Trackman 44 here. You can see I'm in the middle of another project, but it's going to take a little while for me to get enough filmed ahead in order to put up a video. So I'm going back in the archives and digging up some videos that I've never had the opportunity to edit and put up before. And that's what you're going to see today, of just some old stuff laying around the shed or in the shop, some old working tools, things like that, hanging there, and hopefully you'll enjoy it. But I'm going to get back to work on my current project.
Now, I did a video a while back on splitting wood with a homemade one-handed maul, and this is the 8-pound maul, that one of the many that my dad had made years ago in the forge. Now, there's a unique thing about this sledgehammer right here. This sledgehammer is an 8-pound sledge. The reason I set it off to the side is this maul started its life out as that 8-pound sledgehammer right there. This is the exact hammer that was actually forged into that maul. The head on this is mushroomed out a little bit from having to beat on wedges somewhat. Okay, but this is the exact hammer. It's an 8-pound maul, 8-pound sledge right there. Moving on to different kind of hammers. So this is a Bell telephone hammer, and here's another nice one-handed hammer. And then here's one of my favorite size hammers right here. That's about a 3-pound single face with this on the back side. This is a good utility hammer. I've got several of these, and those are some of my favorite beaters. Then of course you get into your ball peens. These are all like a quarter or whatever at a yard sale. This one here I've actually reshaped already. It's ready for a handle. And then this here is kind of a unique one. I've got another one like this that I put in a handle a long time ago. It stays on my workbench. That's a real handy little alternative to a ball peen. This has a different function. You just use it a little bit differently, similarly but differently than a ball peen, or at least I do. And of course these little bitty guys right here. And then I've got a couple of small ones I actually use over on the metal lathe for tapping things like that. So that's a few more little items that keep me busy when there's nothing else to do. And I buy these old handles at farm auctions and everything. This will be a ball peen or a small 2-pound. And then this here's a claw hammer that's actually been broken off. Now I save all these old broken handles because even though it broke off from a hammer that was this long, I can reshape it right here and put it in a much smaller handle. I actually put it into one of the ball peen hammer heads. I've got a bucket full of these sitting over there in the corner, and I usually keep them stuck down into the bucket like this with oil in it, and the oil will soak up and weep up the grain, and it makes it very, very pliable and makes it less apt to break. Now here's something that's really pretty cool. This guy right here, I don't really know what tradesman would use this guy, but it's kind of a universal tool, it looks like. Right here above the handle, it's got a trademark that says, it's got a large B with an H on the top and an M on the bottom, and it says Corporation, and it says trademark underneath that. Now on the other side there's a circular, or up above it, there's a circular logo here, and all I can make out of the circular logo is a few letters and Bridgeport. It says Bridgeport around the circumference, and then 299 in the center of it. Maybe somebody can help me out on that. You know, if you're a young fella that grew up around a blacksmith shop and were just fresh married and didn't have anything, a shop or any tools to speak of, you'd do anything you could to get ahead. Here's a little chunk, about a 10-inch long piece, maybe a 12-inch long piece of light-duty railroad rail that years and years ago I managed to get a cutting torch, I think on the job or whatever, and I just whacked that off. Then I came home and used a little grinder and then just ground as much as I could to get this kind of a horn shape on this for an anvil, and then just trimmed all the rest of it up. And I used a saw and sawed this all out by hand in here and started to grind the back end, or I got it down to where it's reasonably smooth back here. And then of course I used that torch to blow me 4 holes, and then this is what I attached to a block of wood, and that served as my anvil for years and years. At the same time, I had another piece of very, very light duty rail that I'd just kind of come across, so I took and did the same thing, except for I sawed this off with a sawzall into that point and sawed all this off with a sawzall, as well as the back end. I just keep it on the workbench, open up the jaws of my vise, and it fits perfectly right inside here. And so I set that right in the vise, and then that gives me a nice, small, secure work surface to beat on the workbench in here in the wood shop without having to damage and tear up my my good vise. I remember picking this punch up at a yard sale. It's from the National Advertising, St. Louis, Missouri Corporation. I never did decide for certain that it was a metal punch or if it was for thicker advertising materials, but it works fine for this right here. Light gauge. You just use light gauge metal. You don't want anything thick at all, but you can just put it in there like that, pop it, raise it back up, 3/16 hole, just that quick and simple. But it's actually kind of cool. Now, you heard me mention old Sneelock maybe once or twice, and if you haven't checked out old Sneelock's channel, you ought to go ahead and give it a try. If you like old tools, repairing old tools, tinkering with old tools, so I defer to him whenever I run into things that I have absolutely no idea what is. Hopefully he's paying attention on this one here, and I can holler out to him and see if he'll help me identify exactly what this thing is for. As you can see, you got a nice handle on it right here, and it's got rolls that actually roll independently. The cool thing about it though is this right here is a propane torch, but I have never fired this up, and I have no idea what its intended use is. I was thinking it might have had something to do with sealing a joint in linoleum or floor tiling or something like that. We've been around butchering our whole lives. My much older brother came over to the house here about, I don't know, 12 years ago, and he said, hey, the old man had 2 meat cleavers and everything, because we got the one really, really good one. It's sharp enough, man, I mean, you could split hairs with the doggone thing. It's that sharp. That's the one we use all the time butchering. But I did know that the old man had a second cleaver, but it had never been used to any extent at all because it never had a handle in it. Well, my much older brother coming down to visit, kind-hearted soul that he is, he pulled out of the back of his truck the second of the 2 meat cleavers that the old man had. Now what he did, he sat around over there being retired, he's a little bit like me, looking for something to do. Well, there's always something to do. But he grabbed some scrap walnut, out of the sawmill wood pile, and he went ahead and fashioned up a handle and used some copper rivets with the rivet washers and everything, out of the blacksmith shop, and went ahead and made a handle just like the old man would have done, and cleaned it all up, shined it all up, and then burnt my initials into this side here, which is exactly what the old man would have done, except for he forgot to put what year it was. I'd love to remember what year it was by having it melted in there or burnt in there. But true to form, my much older brother, always the jokester, you know what I mean? He puts my initials on this, right? Well, look what he did to this side. He put his initials on the back side. But anyway, this is a very good one also. It's an 8-inch. I don't know what it weighs, but it's a brittle, B-R-I-D-D-E-L-L. Very good cleaver, and almost identical to the one that the one we use all the time. I don't remember what brand it is, but man, that one is a good one. That's compliments of my much older brother a long time ago. Another part of the story, our great-grandfather on my grandmother's side, it was my grandmother's father, he had several hundred acres, that we farmed of his property also. After the property sold, we had to get in there and tear down some of the buildings and all that kind of stuff because the new owner was just going to doze everything down, burn it, and all that. I'm in the granary, because they had an actual granary outside. I was salvaging the limestone block and everything off of that granary base, to help on a project that we had figured for in the future. And lo and behold, in addition to a salt brine tank, which is 9 foot long and roughly 32 inches in diameter and probably about 26 inches deep, that's for salt curing your meat in. That's a big brine tank. Along with that, in that granary, that lean-to on the granary, but I found this old cleaver here. Now this is an authentic old cleaver. It's got a handmade handle on it. It's got the forged stub coming out the back end of the cleaver with a square nut on it and everything, where they would drill a hole in the piece of wood, slide the piece of wood onto the ferrules and everything that they attached here, and then put an additional ferrule on the back side to keep the handles from splitting. But this came from my great-grandfather's farm in the granary on my grandmother's side. This one probably won't be used, never. It's just going to hang up there and look pretty. I cannot for the life of me remember where I got this cleaver right here. And this had to be built sometime in the 1800s, but it's a 12-inch cleaver right here, and it's got an 18-inch handle right here, and that handle is forge welded right here on the back side of the cleaver itself. This obviously had a big long wooden handle that you would hold on to it. And if you notice, the back side of this is all mushroomed out. Now let me tell you what this is for. Back in the day when you're butchering, if you're lucky, you had a handsaw, and you would take the handsaw and saw down the backbone when you're butchering beef and pork, well, anything, but you actually have to saw down the center of that backbone in order to cut your beef in half. What the old timers did, now we had a corn knife, an old corn knife, whenever I was a kid, and we would use that corn knife. It was about 12, 14 inches long, and it was a real thick back, and it was all squared off on the front end of it. And the old man would sit there and he'd hold that right on each joint and just hit it with about maybe a 2 or 2-faced hammer. He'd go ahead and hit it, and it would pop through that section of backbone, hit it, pop right, just dead center all the way down through it. Well, that's exactly what this is right here. This is a cleaver. It's a two-man operation where you would go ahead and you would hold it in position, and then the guy with the hammer would go ahead and hit this, and you would just go right straight down through the backbone, just pop, 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 all the way down to the neck, where you would actually have to, just finish it all up, with a saw or what by whatever means coming out of the real floppy the neck. Now you know how they did it in the old days. That's in the real old days. Now let me tell you. Now this next thing, I guarantee you that I'm not going to ever do anything with, other than play with it in my old age. You know what I mean? As you get older and you've managed to get a reputation for having an eclectic taste when it comes to collecting or accepting things that want to be given to you, you have a tendency to have people call you all the time and say, hey, why don't you swing by and pick this up, or they'll just drive up in your driveway and open up tailgate and say, hey man, take this thing off of here. You never know what it's going to be. And it's kind of fun, it's kind of exciting. Well, this is no exception. I had a buddy of mine call me here about a year or so ago, maybe 2 years ago. He had a whole bunch of stuff he's downsized, wanted to get rid of, and didn't want to throw it away and everything, so he asked me to come over and pick it up. Man, I got some good stuff from him, let me tell you. But this is one of the neatest things right here. Like I said, I'll never use it, and I bet you, and I'm going to mention him again, old Sneelock will probably really enjoy this here. I have no idea where you would use it, but I'm going to show you what, to me, is the world's smallest metal lathe. It's probably not, but it's definitely pretty doggone small. And instead of an actual metal lathe, it's what they call a collet lathe. Collets have an orifice or an opening in it with a three-way split, so when you tighten up the collar on the collet, it squeezes those three splits down on a machine surface and holds a specific diameter of rod or whatever it is that you're turning. So every one of the collets has to be specifically sized for the size material that you're wanting to turn. That's why it's called a collet lathe. It's not like a real metal lathe. And unfortunately, I only have this one collet that's in it. So let's take a look. But anyway, here you can see the tailstock. You can just loosen up tailstock and slide it forward. You can lock the tailstock down in place. This here you loosen up and turn. This isn't freed up yet, but when you loosen this up, just like a little lathe, you can go ahead and index this forward and backwards. And then right here, if you can take a look right here, you can see that collet. Now that opening inside that collet is so tiny, it doesn't even look to be a 32nd of an inch. I just wish that I could get you guys to where you could actually see it right there. Maybe you can see that right there. See if there's a number on it. There's an 8 on it, but that thing is so tiny I don't think just barely the tip of a needle or the tip of a pin will go into it. But if you take a look, see, here's your power unit back here. It's a Hamilton Beach power unit, similar to what would be on a Singer sewing machine or something like that, and it would drive with a either a leather, in the old days be a leather belt, or possibly a 1/4 inch or so O-ring that will go all the way up around here. Now that motor, it's got a variable speed controller, so I'm sure this is a rheostat. It's a 50 watt 110 volt rheostat, and that plugs into the wall, and then at the same time it's got a plug that plugs right into the factory plug on the Hamilton Beach motor. So they are definitely made for each other, and at the same time I don't know exactly where the mount is for this right here, but it has, in addition to all this other stuff, it has a magnifying glass that's exceptionally dirty and a light bulb, and guess what? The cord's not dry cracked or anything. I've plugged it in and turned it on. The light works and works fine. The headstock moves too. See, you can loosen this up right here, and you can move the headstock in or out. This I just got latched into this vise. Remember the vise I told you I'd never used? I just stuck it in the vise, but it's actually made to go through a table, go through a piece of wood or a table, and then bolt with a fender washer, up from the bottom. But this is a very heavy little fella, and I have no idea what brand it is. There's no anything on it except for the Hamilton Beach information on that motor. We didn't even touch the surface. I've still got 20 things lined up over here. We're just taking too much time, I have a tendency to talk too much. You can see in the background I've got the bell saw model 10452 set up with another buzz saw ready to clean up and sharpen. And one thing about it, it makes a good work table or at least a storage bench where I can set my parts and pieces on. If I got a blade ready to sharpen but I'm not sharpening it yet, I can set stuff on it. It gives us a little more surface area, to cover up. Hey, you know what? I have beat this one to death, and this is TrackMan 44, and I am out of here, guys.